Hi guys, welcome back to our channel. In today's video, we will discuss the book Influence written by Robert B. Cialdini. Introduction. You must have been manipulated your whole life, now it's time to learn the secrets of persuasion for yourself. Did it happen again? Did you catch yourself buying something you didn't actually need, like a lava lamp, just because the sales clerk persuaded you to? Or maybe you donated to a vague cause just because someone accosted you on the street? Or maybe you somehow got roped into a gym contract that you didn't really want in the first place? If so, you've likely fallen prey to a compliance professional, someone who knows exactly what buttons to push and which strings to pull to make you comply with their requests. Well, you're in luck because the author, Robert B. Cialdini, has been through it all. He's always felt like a patsy, someone who's all too easy to trick and manipulate. And that's why he's dedicated his entire career to the question of why people comply with others' requests. He has conducted several experiments on the topic but has also gathered data through interviewing compliance professionals, as well as by watching them ply their craft. So how does this help you? This summary will explain 6 fundamental principles of manipulation and the most relevant persuasion techniques that compliance professionals employ. After reading them, you'll not only be able to defend yourself from deceit, but also put these techniques to use yourself, should you wish to flex your persuasive muscle. You'll also learn what the magic words are to be able to skip a line, why you should be wary of people doing you unbidden favors, and how to make sun worshippers into bona fide justice warriors. Point 1. Our brain loves shortcuts, and they can be used to manipulate us. Turkey mothers are wonderful parents, loving, protective and nurturing of their young. However, look a little more closely, and you'll see that this tenderness hangs by a single thread. If a chick emits the distinctive cheep cheep sound, the mother will care for it lovingly. But if the chick does not, the mother will ignore or even kill it. The cheep cheep sound is so persuasive that even a replica of the turkey's arch-nemesis, the polecat, will elicit tender care from the mother turkey as long as it cheeps loudly. For the mother turkey, the sound is a simple shortcut that allows her to quickly and, in most cases, reliably identify its chicks, triggering its maternal instincts. We humans like to think of ourselves as clever, which is why the mother turkey's shortcut can seem quite foolish to us. But the fact is that we use very similar psychological shortcuts as well. This is due to simple necessity. The world is a complex place where we can't reflect upon the details of every decision we make. Thus, we use quick shortcuts, and most of the time, they serve us well. One example of such a shortcut is that we're much more willing to do people a favor if they provide us with a reason, any reason. In an experiment to study this phenomenon, a researcher asked people queuing up to use a copy machine whether she could skip the line. She found that if she gave a reason, "May I skip the line because I'm in a rush?" 94% of people complied with her request. If she gave no reason, only 60% complied. But, fascinatingly, if she gave a nonsensical reason, "May I skip the line because I need to make copies?" 93% still complied. Apparently, people have a mental shortcut that deems any reason at all sufficient to grant a favor. More worryingly, just as scientists can trick a turkey into mothering a stuffed polecat, so-called compliance professionals like advertisers, salesmen, and con artists can fool us into using our shortcuts against our own interests. They usually do this to get us to comply with their demands, for example, to buy a product. One example is the commonly abused price indicates quality shortcut. People usually assume expensive items are of higher quality than cheap ones. While this shortcut is often at least partially accurate, a wily salesman might well use it against us. For example, did you know that souvenir shops often sell unpopular goods by raising rather than lowering their prices? Since dealing with the complexities of life means having to rely on shortcuts, we must identify and defend ourselves against the manipulators who would trick us into wrongly using those shortcuts, lest we end up looking as foolish as the poor mother turkey. The following points will introduce you to 6 basic psychological principles that we use as shortcuts and which can be exploited for persuasion: reciprocation, scarcity, consistency, social proof, liking, and authority. Point 2. Humans have an overpowering need to return favors. Has anyone ever given you something on the street, like a flower or a free sample of something? Do waiters at restaurants occasionally bring complimentary sweets along with your bill? As innocent as these gestures may seem, they are actually relatively simple tricks to influence your behavior. You see, the first psychological principle of persuasion is the rule of reciprocation. We feel obliged to return favors. This rule forms the foundation of all societies, for it allowed our ancestors to share resources, safe in the knowledge that they would be reciprocated later. And if someone does us a favor and we do not return it, we feel a psychological burden. This is partially because, as a society, we are disdainful of those who do not reciprocate favors. We label them as moochers or ingrates and fear being labeled as such ourselves. How intense is the desire to reciprocate, you ask? Well, it can even be seen in the long-term relations between countries. Consider that in 1985, Ethiopia was probably one of the worst-off countries in the world, ravaged by poverty, starvation and disease. And yet, in that year, the country's Red Cross sent $5,000 to aid earthquake victims in Mexico City. Why would this desperately impoverished country send money to another faraway land? Simple. In 1935, when Italy had invaded Ethiopia, Mexico had sent aid to the country, and this was an opportunity to return the favor. In fact, people are so keen to rid themselves of the burden of reciprocity that they will often perform much larger favors in return for small ones. For example, in a 1971 study by psychologist Dennis Regan, a researcher, Joe, masqueraded as a fellow participant and bought test subjects a 10-cent Coke as an unbidden favor. Later on, it turned out that Joe needed a favor. He was trying to sell as many raffle tickets as possible to win a prize. Would the subjects help him out by buying some? On average, the subjects who had received the unbidden Coke reciprocated by purchasing 50 cents worth of tickets, twice the amount compared to if no Coke was given. The feeling of indebtedness even seemed to outweigh likability. Some of the participants bought Joe's raffle tickets even though they said they did not like him. Obviously, this was an example of abusing the reciprocity principle, because Joe was the only one making truly free choices in the situation. He not only forced a debt onto the subjects by buying them a Coke but also chose the method of reciprocation. In the 1970s, the Krishna organization in the United States also used this tactic to great effect. They gifted flowers to passers-by on the street and, though generally annoyed, people often made donations to the organization to satisfy their need to reciprocate the gift of the flower. So how can you fight back? As stated earlier, reciprocity plays a fundamental role in the way societies and social relationships work, so you can't forego the principle entirely. But you can learn to identify and resist deliberate attempts to abuse it. Start by getting into the habit of asking yourself if the favors you receive are really genuine, or if they could be attempts to manipulate you. Think about whether you actually want to donate your money to that non-profit organization, or if you only feel obliged because they handed you a gift on the street. And don't worry about not reciprocating favors that are really manipulation attempts in disguise. Favors warrant favors in return, but tricks do not. Point 3. In negotiations, starting with an outrageous request and retreating from there can win concessions. Just as we desire to pay back favors, when we're negotiating with someone and they make a concession, we'll feel obliged to reciprocate it. This is known as the rejection then retreat strategy. The author experienced this firsthand when a Boy Scout approached him on the street, wishing to sell him tickets to the annual Boy Scout circus. The author declined to buy the $5 ticket, after which the boy asked if, seeing as how he wasn't buying any tickets, he would at least buy some chocolate bars for $1 apiece. As a result, the author found himself buying two in order to match the concession the boy made when he retreated to peddling the cheaper wares. What makes rejection then retreat such a powerful persuasion technique is that in addition to evoking our desire to reciprocate concessions, it also benefits from the contrast principle. When two items are presented to us one after the other, the difference of the second to the first is magnified. Thus, the $1 chocolate bar the boy offered seemed disproportionately cheap compared to the more expensive circus ticket. The dynamic is fairly simple to put to use. If you want something specific from a negotiation partner, start with an offer they are pretty sure to reject. Then, retreat from your initial offer to what you really want. Your opponent will probably see this as a concession and feel obliged to make a similar one. This strategy is often employed by labor negotiators, who start with extreme positions and then gradually retreat while extracting concessions from the other side. However, researchers have discovered that there's a limit to how extreme your opening position can be. If it's too outrageous, you'll be seen as a bad faith negotiator, and subsequent concessions will not be reciprocated. The rejection then retreat strategy has even brought down presidents, such as in the infamous Watergate scandal. In 1972, the re-election of President Richard Nixon seemed inevitable. Yet, somehow, a man called G. Gordon Liddy managed to convince the committee to re-elect the president, CRP, and they should give him $250,000 to burglarize the offices of the Democratic National Committee. This was a preposterously risky undertaking, but Liddy used the rejection then retreat strategy. He started by suggesting a $1 million scheme involving kidnapping, mugging, and prostitution. Though his later second and third proposals were still scandalous and incredibly ill-conceived, the CRP felt they had to give Liddy something for his concessions from his first scheme. Also, compared to the initial outrageous $1 million proposal, the $250,000 scheme involving mere burglary no longer sounded that bad. As you probably know, the burglars were caught, and the resulting scandal eventually forced Nixon to resign. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to this channel, like, and share this video with your friends and family.